In 2001, when a Cessna Citation XL touched down at a private terminal outside London, the man who stepped off didn't go through customs the way you do. There was no line, no queue, no overhead bin to wait on. A car was on the ramp. He was in his meeting in 40 minutes. That same day, 112,000 people missed connections at Heathrow. He was never aware of them, not because he was cruel, because his world and their world had stopped sharing the same infrastructure entirely. That's what private aviation is, at its core. Not speed, not luxury, not the leather seats or the catered meals. It's the removal of shared infrastructure. There are 7. They are not equal. And the gap between level 1 and level 7 is not a gap in comfort. It's a gap in what reality even looks like. Let's break it down. Level 1. Turboprops and entry jets. The Beechcraft King Air. The Pilatus PC-12. The Cessna Citation Mustang. This is where private aviation begins, and where most people's understanding of it ends. These are single-engine turboprops and very light jets. Range of 1,000 to 1,800 miles. Capacity of 6 to 9 passengers. Charter cost of $2,000 to $4,500 per flight hour. A 2-hour charter from New York to Boston runs $5,000 to $9,000. That sounds expensive until you factor in what you're actually buying. You're not buying a seat. You're buying a departure time. You leave when you're ready. The terminal is a lounge with 8 people in it. Security is a formality. You board in 3 minutes. The King Air lands at 4,800 airports across North America. Commercial aviation serves roughly 500. You're not just bypassing the experience of flying commercially. You're accessing a different country, one that happens to overlap geographically with the one everyone else uses, but operates on completely different terms. Who uses Level 1? The regional business owner who drove 4 hours for meetings twice a month before someone ran the numbers. A King Air charter from Nashville to 3 cities in one day costs $12,000. That same trip on commercial, factoring in connections, delays, hotel nights, and the 2 days lost, costs something closer to $15,000 when you price the executive's time at what it's actually worth. The charter is cheaper. That's the moment people stop flying commercial and never really go back. The mistake at this level is thinking it's an indulgence. For the people using it, it's an operational decision. The luxury is a side effect. The point is the productivity level. 2. Light jets. The Embraer Phenom 300, the Citation CJ4, the Learjet 75 range extends to 2,000 to 2,400 miles. You can now fly coast to coast with one stop or non-stop across most of Europe. Charter rates run $4,500 to $7,000 per hour. Cabin stands up to about 5 feet 9 inches, 6 passengers in genuine comfort, baggage that actually fits. The Phenom 300 has been the best-selling business jet in the world for over a decade. There's a reason. It hits a specific target exactly right. Large enough to feel like a real aircraft, small enough to land at virtually any reliever airport, efficient enough to charter at a price point where the math starts working for a wider range of users. At Level 2, something changes in the dynamic. Level 1 is about convenience. Level 2 is about capability. A Phenom 300 can get you from London to Marrakesh, or Miami to Aspen, or Chicago to both coasts in a day with a fuel stop. You're now covering geography that used to require planning. It starts to feel less like transportation and more like a tool. Who's here? The management consultant whose firm started buying block hours after 3 senior partners did the math on billable hours lost to airports. The entrepreneurial couple who realized their weekend house in another state only worked if the travel didn't take the weekend with it. And the growing number of people who discovered fractional ownership, buying a share of a specific aircraft category through companies like NetJets or Wheels Up, and found that 50 hours a year of guaranteed access costs less than they expected and changes more than they anticipated. Level 3. Midsize and super-midsize jets, the Citation Latitude, the Challenger 350, the Gulfstream G280, range of 3,000 to 4,000 miles. Stand-up cabin, a proper lavatory, a flat work surface, a galley that produces real food, not just items placed in a microwave. Charter rates of $7,000 to $12,000 per hour. 8 to 10 passengers in a cabin that no longer requires you to pretend. You're comfortable. The Challenger 350 is the aircraft that changes how people think about what flying actually is. You board. The seats are wide. There is no middle seat concept. The windows are large. The cabin pressure is set lower than commercial aviation, so you land less exhausted. You can sleep. You can work without a screen reflecting someone else's. Movie. You can have a conversation at normal volume. It sounds trivial until you realize how much of your life has been subtracted from you in small increments by the alternative. At this level, the aircraft stops being a faster version of flying and becomes a different category of experience entirely. The 4,000-mile range gets you London to Dubai, New York to Reykjavik, Los Angeles to somewhere in South America, non-stop. Time zones are no longer the constraint. Connections are gone from your vocabulary. Who's here? The private equity partner. Who owns a share in a Challenger 350 through a fractional program and uses it 80 hours a year. The family traveling internationally 4 times annually who realize the difference in experience and recovery time between a charter and a business. Class seat was worth the cost differential, at least for the trips that mattered. And the early-stage billionaire, the $40 to $80 million net worth range, who chartered for 2 years before a broker ran the numbers and showed them that at their usage rate, ownership was within reach. Level 4, large cabin jets, the Gulfstream G550, the Falcon 7X, the Bombardier Global 6000 range of 6,000 to 7,000 miles. Non-stop from New York to London, New York to Tokyo with one stop, Los Angeles to Sydney possible barely. Charter rates run $12,000 to $18,000 per hour. Cabin length of 45 to 50 feet, multiple zones. A dedicated crew rest area. A galley producing food from a real menu. 10 to 14 passengers. The Global 6000 has a cabin divided into 3 distinct living areas. Forward, a conference zone where 6 people can work around a table. Mid-cabin, a lounge configuration, seats that face each other, a sofa on some configurations. Aft, a private suite, sometimes with a bed that lies flat. The aircraft has its own crew, a captain, a first officer, and a flight attendant who knows your preferences before you board because the operator filed them 3 days ago. At level 4, the aircraft stops being measured against other aircraft. It starts being measured against your schedule. The Gulfstream G550 with a range of 6,750 miles can reach 94% of the world's city pairs in 1 stop or less. You are no longer routing yourself. You are routing the world around you. Meetings get scheduled where you want them. Time zones become negotiable. Jet lag is something you manage with a flatbed and a protocol, not something that happens to you. Level 5, ultra-long-range jets, the Gulfstream G700, the Bombardier Global 7500, the Dassault Falcon 10X range of 7,500 to 8,000 miles. Non-stop from New York to Singapore, London to Perth, any city on Earth to almost any other city on Earth without stopping. Charter rates of $18,000 to $28,000 per hour. New purchase price of $70 to $80 million. Annual operating costs of $40 to $7 million. The Gulfstream G700 carries a specification that would have seemed aspirational for a boutique hotel a decade ago. Circadian lighting that adjusts to destination time zones, recalibrating your body before you land. 20 Rolls-Royce Pearl. 700 engines producing 80,000 pounds of thrust combined. A takeoff roll that accelerates like something with a fraction of the weight. And a range that means the word connection has been removed from your travel vocabulary permanently. Who's at this level? Fewer than 1,000 people in the world who own an aircraft in this category. The tech founder whose net worth crossed $500 million and who spent 6 months rationalizing the decision before his CFO pointed out that the productivity recovery on a Singapore trip alone funded 2 months of operating costs. The head of a sovereign wealth fund who cannot, for security reasons, fly commercial. The family that lives on 3 continents and realize the aircraft is the thread that holds the geography of their life together. Level 6. VIP Airliners. The Boeing BBJ, the Airbus ACJ, the Embraer Lineage, $1,000. This is where private aviation stops being about aircraft and starts being about architecture. You take the fuselage of a commercial airliner, a 737 or A320 or A330, strip the interior to bare metal, and rebuild the inside as a private estate. Purchase prices of $100 to $400 million depending on base aircraft and fit out. Annual operating costs north of $10 million. Range with auxiliary fuel tanks of 10,000 miles on some configurations. At level 6, the aircraft is no longer measured by range or seat count or hourly rate. It's measured by what the owner requires from their flying environment. The word flying almost doesn't apply. You board in one city. You sleep, work, eat a 4-course meal, take a shower, and deplane in another. The transit itself is invisible. This is not travel, it's relocation. Who commissions this? Heads of state, royal families, a small number of technology and energy. Billionaires whose wealth passed a threshold where the aircraft is less a status symbol than a functional necessity. The Saudi prince who receives delegations at altitude. The tech billionaire who holds board meetings in a BBJ cabin because it is the one room on Earth where no one can interrupt the meeting with a knock on the door. At this level, the aircraft is not infrastructure. The aircraft is the office, the home, and the boundary of a private world that happens to move at 550 miles per hour. Level 7, the final level. Custom head of state configurations and one-of-a-kind commissions. The Boeing VC-25A, Air Force One. The 2 aircraft in that designation were acquired in 1990 at a cost of roughly $660 million for the pair. Operating cost per flight hour, approximately $200,000. This is not a charter number or an annual budget line. This is the figure every time the wheels lift. The aircraft carries its own communications infrastructure capable of operating as a functioning government in flight. An airborne command center, a surgical suite, hardened electronics against electromagnetic pulse, in-flight refueling capability that makes range, for practical purposes, unlimited. At level 7, the aircraft is not a possession. It is a nation-state's worth of capability concentrated in 200 feet of aluminum and carbon fiber. The person on board is not traveling. They are projecting. Presence, power, the capacity to be anywhere on Earth within hours, answerable to no schedule, no carrier, no gate agent, no weather delay that a fuel load and a different routing can't solve. The question at level 7 is not how much it costs. The question is what, precisely, it costs not to have it. Closing private aviation started as a convenience. Then it became a tool, then infrastructure, then, at the top, something that doesn't have a clean category anymore. At level 1, you're buying your time back from an airport. At level 7, you're buying your world back from geography itself. Every level in between is just a different answer to the same question. How much of the friction between you and what you need to do are you willing to pay to remove? The person chartering a King Air for a regional sales trip and the head of state boarding, Air Force One, are doing the same thing. They've decided that shared infrastructure is a constraint they'd rather not live inside. The difference is the scale of what they've built to replace it. If this was useful, subscribe. I break down how things actually work, not how the brochure describes them. See you in the next one.